The company I have chosen to examine and propose thought leadership to is Bale Breaker Brewing Company. First, I wanted to examine the people of the company to see if that they would place value in thought leadership. As it turns out, they're all highly educated and I believe would find great value in thought leadership. The business manager and head brewer are both UW graduates. The person in charge of sales and distribution holds 2 degrees from the University of Washington, while the hop farmer holds a degree from the University of Washington, a master's from Purdue, and an MBA from Kelley School of Business. I invite you to go back and pause these slides and read their bios, as I feel that it would further highlight my position on the fact that they would value thought leadership. Next, I wanted to examine the strength of the industry. Bale Breaker is a craft brewery and but a small percentage of the whole brewery industry in the United States. Yet, within that small percentage, they managed to grow 10% year over year, totaling of about $23.5 billion of a $107.6 billion industry. This 10% increase leads me to believe that it's sizable enough to call it a strong industry and thereby worth looking into. Next, I'd like to look at location. Bale Breaker Brewing is located in the Yakima Valley. The Yakima Valley produces about 70% of the hops for beer production in North America. Bale Breaker also happens to have its own hop farm. This is a strategic advantage because Bale Breaker can produce their own hops. This is yet another strength for Bale Breaker, but it is not the primary focus of the thought leadership. If we look at the economic activity, state by state, Bale Breaker's location becomes even more strategic importance. The Northwest is home to a lot of economic activity in regards to beer, thus making the market large and easily accessible so they don't have to distribute across the United States. With a large market, it's important to have good branding, as there are many alternatives in the craft brew industry. Though this would be an area good for thought leadership, Bale Breaker already does a really good job of this and is very notable in the Northwest. Moving from branding to product, it's easy to see that Bale Breaker does a good job of distinguishing themselves. They have core colors across the cans, bright yellow, green, white, with splashes of color. It is important to note that of their core products, they're all IPAs or in the pale ale to IPA category. The fact that Bale Breaker's product line consists mostly of IPAs seems to work in their favor currently, as IPAs seem to dominate the market share. On top of this, within the IPA category alone, there's also room to growth. For example, session IPA sales jumped up 200%, and English IPA sales jumped up 78%. American IPAs are still sitting at the top, and that's pretty much where Bale Breaker sits in the traditional American IPA. However, is the session IPA growth a leading indicator of perhaps a shift in the entire beer industry, or is it just a microcosm shift within the IPA industry? I think this area would be best served to use thought leadership. There's an article written sharing these exact same sentiments, stating that IPA is still by far the most popular craft beer style. Is this a long-term problem? In the article it states, but those breweries with much larger distribution plans in mind will need to focus more on that of the next frontier and possibly compromise the creativity and spirit of what built their success in the first place. Again, this is where I would pose myself as a thought leader and move Bale Breaker into the next frontier. They're a core group of employees which are very well educated and very knowledgeable about their beer, but perhaps they're too entrenched in their core beliefs and what brought them to the front of beer industry to maybe make that change. I would hope that with their educational background that they would be receptive to said ideas and be willing to move on from the IPA core and perhaps explore new frontiers of beer making. This graph helps illustrate the point of perhaps the IPA section leveling off. Here we have the demand in the pink leveling off while the production is rapidly catching up. This helps highlight another issue and perhaps another reason for Balebreaker moving to a new frontier. Balebreaker is vertically integrated. They produce what they need for production. This provides for them a comparative advantage. They have a hop farm, so they're not paying markups on hops. They control their own supply of hops, so they don't have shortages brought on by people buying up large fields of hops, and they're not subject to increase or decrease in demand shifts. They then have their brewery, where they can fully realize their investment in the hops, and they can produce a consistent beer, as again they don't have shortages brought on by people buying up large quantities of hops, and they can control the quality of the hops that they receive. However, as hop production continues to increase and demand starts to level off, they start to lose this comparative advantage because the market is less volatile, and having your own hop farm becomes less of an advantage. I thought it prudent to do some market research at the store where the average consumer might purchase the product. Do you see Balebreaker on the shelf? Here's the beer aisle of another store. Again, do you see Balebreaker? Notice all the competition and how hard it would be for any given beer to stand out to the average consumer. Here's another picture standing directly in front of Balebreaker. Notice how hard it still is to make out where it is on the shelf. The point is, you can't just be another beer on the shelf. There's lots of options with lots of different colored cans. You need something to separate yourself. If all this data wasn't enough to prove the point that Balebreaker needs a thought leader, I would bring in some past examples of how thought leadership can push existing products into new frontiers. Remember the milk campaigns and the beef campaigns? Remember the Got Milk campaign, when milk was trying to separate itself from cheap sugary soft drinks that were flooding the market?
Beef. It's what's for dinner.
I would close by reinforcing my position by using the matrix models. I would start by showing that they have a current high market growth and a low market share, and in the Boston matrix gives them a problem child. However, if the market growth slows down, they could end up with a dog. That's no good. They need to move from where they currently sit and shift left to get a high market growth and have a high market share. However, because the market is so saturated with IPAs, this would require them to look at the Ansoff matrix and take an existing market and develop a new product. The existing market being the craft beer industry, and the new product being some fringe new beer, or perhaps pushing the frontier of a new beer that hasn't been thought of yet. It is in this way that they could have a larger percentage of the market share and perhaps push growth in a new area of beer. Then they could live in the star category, perhaps a cash cow. But as it sits now, they're at a problem child and perhaps moving to a dog as the IPA industry lags. Balebreaker is a great company with a lot of strengths. The core group of owners places value in education. It is for this reason I believe that they would see the obvious value in thought leadership in making positive changes in their future.